Good to go, Brother Shaheed.
Okay. Good morning, Los Angeles and other listening audience. We are excited to introduce to you a panel of speakers that will help us celebrate El-Haj Malik al-Shabazz, popularly known as Malcolm X. I will introduce each panelist as they come on. But starting with myself, I currently am the Director of Education for the LA South Chamber of Commerce, which is a commerce in the Los Angeles area that focuses mainly on South Los Angeles. I'm currently in San Diego. I am an original person from Los Angeles. I grew up in Watts, Los Angeles, Compton, and Long Beach. I'm currently in San Diego and was the Director of Race and Human Relations for San Unified School District in retirement. So I'd like to bring on some big ideas here. We're going to talk about really an infamous person, a person who is known throughout the world. Malcolm X, as he's popularly known, okay, exploded on the scene of consciousness and thinking. When I first went to college, it was required reading. I went to Long Beach State University, and we had to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was kind of a main introduction to the reading public. Since then, we had a movie that was produced, and the famed actor Denzel Washington actually portrayed Malcolm X. And then there are just many, many, many books out. The Black Book, which is a play about Malcolm X meeting Martin Luther King, and the autobiography are well known, but we'd like you to go to your reading list and just Google and look at all the books that come up. Now, we chose this panel for very, very specific reasons. We chose Dr. Ricky Popen. He will be introducing this to kind of give a analysis of the different personalities and phases that contributed to the unfolding of El-Haj Malik al-Shabazz. We have Imam Toure, who's going to really assist us to understand deeply El-Haj Malik al-Shabazz because he is Muslim first, humanist later, and particularly what are the communities around the world that share the faith with him? How are they honoring Malcolm X? And then we're bringing Abdul Rahman Ali, who is a person who introduces himself as just a person, just a regular brother, living his life. I've known him for a number of years. He's traveled in parts of the world in search of his reality. And he's going to speak as an everyday person who was influenced by El-Haj Malik al-Shabazz. And then Ralph Softly, who happens to be on our Chamber of Commerce with our travel department, travelsoftly.com. And Ralph is a student of Malcolm X for many, many years. He's well read on the subject, and he is also the everyday voice. And then we'll open to the public. So I'd like to bring on our director of the LA South Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to bring on Dexter McLeod.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are in the world here. Could be the afternoon or evening. Again, thank you, Brother Shaheed. Brother Shaheed took up the role as far as being the director and the lead of our education team. And it's very important that we have proper education. Okay, we're not your average chamber. You'll soon find that out as you follow us and be a part of this organization. We're not your average chamber. We're about collaboration. We're about cooperative economics. We're about serving our community and educating our community. And I asked Brother Gene to come up with something for today, because again, this day marks Brother Malcolm's, I don't know what year his birthday is, but it is his birthday today. And I know that, some places around the world and in the country, they do more celebrations or more recognitions than we do here in Los Angeles. Yes, I know we do have some events this weekend that's happening in recognition of Brother Malcolm. But like I said, there's never enough information. And again, we would not have enough time in this little hour and a half time slot to go over the legacy and the history of Brother Malcolm. Brother Malcolm was very influential in my life as far as learning and learning his teachings. He was unapologetically bold, just unapologetically. He just said it the way it needed to be said. I know a lot of people didn't agree, didn't understand, but at that time, it was a conversation that needed to be had. And then when Hollywood got involved and made it popular, then we took it because it was information, and it was for the masses of people to realize that Brother Malcolm was a person of peace. A lot of people thought that he was a person of violence. He was not. He was a person of peace, and he was speaking for the masses of folks in order to bring to light the different issues that plagued our community that unfortunately still do. We are still being hoodwinked. Yes, we are. We still rely on systems and institutions instead of being self-sustainable and being self-reliant. And again, all of that is part of the reasons that we started this organization, so we could be self-sustainable, so we could teach how to be self-reliable. And that's very, very important in any community, in any culture, in any society, is learn how to be self-sustainable, self-reliable, and to be knowledgeable. Okay. And, history is not always fun. It's not always pleasant, but you cannot sweep it under the rug because it is history and it is true. And long as we're speaking the truth, as Brother Malcolm did, in many cases, speaking the truth, then we need to embrace that truth and we need to learn from it and move forward. So I just want to welcome you all this afternoon for this little bit of time.
Hey, let me let you know, everybody, the calls are recorded, monitor for quality assurance. How are you?
Well, I will, I got it. So I will, like I said, just wanted to thank you for this time that we're going to share this afternoon, this little bit of time, so we can learn, ask questions, and again, just appreciate and recognize the commitment, the sacrifice of Brother Malcolm and the service he did, and Sister Betty, and his children. All the sacrifices that they had to make, and those are things that people don't realize, that everybody had to make sacrifices. He made the ultimate sacrifice, but that affected his whole family, and it affected our community. So again, thank you all for your work that you do, your commitment, your talent. I'm looking forward to listening to it and taking notes. And I'm praying that all of you all stay healthy, stay prosperous, and again, stay knowledgeable. So thank you, Brother Shahid.
Well, thank you very much. So I'd like to say just a little bit more before we bring in the LA South Chamber of Commerce is about to embark on a leadership training coming up in the next month or so. And as Dexter and I had this dialogue, we thought it was very, very important that the voices of South Los Angeles be heard in all of its variety, and particularly in terms of leadership. El Haj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, he inspired us and challenged us to look at and undo and change systemic systems that actually led to outright oppression or subjugation of the average people and everybody. And so we wanted this in part, we did, the target audience of this, believe it or not, is for the 400 or more members of the Los Angeles South Chamber of Commerce. But we also decided to open it up. It did come at the last minute, as some of you know, just a few days ago. But we wanted to open it up to the public so that the public can also, when you hear Los Angeles South Chamber of Commerce, who are they? What are they doing? What are they thinking about? And in our leadership retreat, we want to include the voice of Malcolm X, because this chamber does not come in the tradition of your average chambers. This chamber is actually dedicated to stand aside and go after yet different goals for the people of South Los Angeles. Also, I want to give a little genesis in this last minute. I had a conversation with Abdurrahman Ali, who you're going to hear, and he's as much responsible for this podcast as anyone, because he said something to me when I asked him about Malcolm X that actually brought tears to my eyes. I just couldn't control it in what he said. And then Ralph Softly, a conversation with him. And then Imam Torre does
When
not.
you close it, you can look out the window.
Imam Torre doesn't know this, but I've actually known him over the years, and he actually knows several members of my family. He's been an influence actually on one of my sons, and an influence on a lot of mine who is well known in the Los Angeles community. And so from those voices, I went back to Dexter and said, okay, Dexter, yeah, we're gonna have to really do this even more. Okay, and so thanks all of you for your voices and bringing this to this moment. And it is only the beginning. We're not going to do check the box. Okay, we did Malcolm X. No, in the balance of the year, I will be doubling back and asking all of you here to assist as we do particular understandings on Malcolm X, and even to be invited, as some of you do the things that you will do, honoring Malcolm X, not only on a birthday, but throughout the year and over time. So I'd like to bring on Dr. Ricky Pope. Dr. Ricky Pope is here in San Diego. Dr. Ricky Pope is the president of the Association of San Diego Black Psychologists. He's an adjunct professor at San Diego State. I'll do a little personal insight, if you don't mind, Ricky. He grew up, like many of us, an angry young Black man. Teachers feared him. School systems feared him, as he was asked not to be in certain schools. And they just didn't know what was going to be up with Ricky, okay, as so many of us Black men have to go through some stages as we arrive through the concrete jungles of America. Well, Ricky now is Dr. Ricky Pope, coming back with an additional voice out of that experience. So he's going to help us understand a position paper that he wrote while working on a degree in Oakland, California, also dialoguing with the Black Panther Party and other Black organizations on Malcolm. So Ricky, you're on.
Thank you, Rajin. I appreciate it. So yes, I think one of the things, at least what I hope to bring to this conversation as it relates to Malcolm, is more of as a student. And so I think for me, just going through K through 12, you know, I didn't get to learn about my history. And so when I got to college, that's when I started to learn about Black history, Malcolm X, Black Panther Party, and was influenced by the autobiography as well as the film by Denzel there and Spike Lee. So I think as a psychologist, what I want to say, I'm really interested in the development of folks, people, humans across the lifespan and how different experiences shapes our worldview. And so if you take the life of Malcolm and you look across his entire life, and you know, even starting with his childhood and a lot of the things popularized in the film and talked about in the autobiography, you know, just the interactions in elementary school and middle school, and kind of the teachers, not believing in him, right? And just what that does to your psyche as a young person in the world. I think those themes resonated with me and kind of influenced my life in the work that I hope to do with the young men that I work with and young people that I work with. So I don't know. So I think I kind of looked at history and in Black men in particular, because I was searching for like a role model, templates, blueprints, father figures. And so what Malcolm represented for me and then some of my research into the Black Panther Party, where it's documented, right? Like that, like this idea of self-determination, right? Like of doing for self and protecting the community. And so I came to this research as an undergrad. I had a professor invite me to work on a grant, and what she was studying was non-state actors who espouse violence while also providing social services. And so we looked at the Black Panther Party as a case in America to understand, like, why did they provide these social services and in the community? And so I interviewed a bunch of Black folks, poured through documents, different libraries, different special archives, and we wrote this paper. And then basically what it came to, because a lot of folks talk about the guns and the violence and that piece, and what our analysis suggested that the guns were an act of love, right? Like you have a society, a community that you're living in, and you're being, hunted, interrogated, policed, and there's no way to say, hey, I need help, this is wrong, right? And so you got to protect yourself. And so that was actually a love for their community, for their family. And so that's what really stands out to me, that there were Black men throughout the history of America that we've been dealing with all this racism and white supremacy that stood up and tried to do something different than what was being done. And so that's why I have an appreciation for his story, his narrative, and one of the reasons why I wanted to show up when Ajin asked me to do so. So I don't know if there's more you want me to say, Ajin, but definitely I
Yes,
appreciate it.
actually, I'd like to guide you along on this. Can you share a little bit, a conversation we had about the dynamics of that research paper where you looked at the different stages, Hall, Friedel, and Cross model, where they look at stages of Black consciousness? Okay, and you know that stage one is self-awareness. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about the analysis of that movie, because we do have Malcolm Little from Omaha, Nebraska, a son of parents who were part of the Marcus Garvey movie and the trauma that happened to his father and his mother. Then we have Detroit Red, okay. Then we have Malcolm X, which really was a product of the Nation of Islam, okay. And then his final evolution to Haj Malik al-Shabazz, and even heading organizations like the OAU, the Organization of African American Unity. And then again, we'll have the next speakers actually going to help us understand what communities now are doing with Malcolm. But just kind of go through some of those stages.
Absolutely.
Look
So,
at it in your paper.
yep. So,
You got about 6 minutes. So
okay, excellent. So stage one, as popularized by Cross, is the pre-encounter stage. And that's where a person would identify with white people and white culture and reject or devalue Black people and Black culture. I don't think that theme, from what I can understand in his early life, is a theme, right? Like just with his father is a preacher, and he was a man who stood up for something, right? And so I don't think that theme really fits for him in particular. But then you have the encounter stage that's popularized by Cross. And so that's when you're an emotional personal experience which fosters a need to change, right? So you think about seeing his father, in the fire, I believe it was, murdered and killed early in his life. So that's an encounter stage, or in the school, right? And you're trying to, run for, a president of the school or whatever, or you want to go to college, and then somebody's telling you, hey man, you can't do that, right? Like that's not for you, right? So that's an encounter stage, and that's where you're gonna be looking at what does all this mean, right? Coming in awareness of there's something going on, which I assume at an early age, he already had an idea about, you know, race and racism. But then in stage 3 is your immersion stage. And that's where the person completely identifies with Blacks, idealizes Black culture, and abhors all things white. And so I think that's probably where you would see the Detroit Red and then the Malcolm X, like kind of right there in that stage, emerging into that. And, you know, everything Black, I don't want to deal with these white folks. Stage 4 is internalization, right? A person overcomes defensiveness, idealization, and psychological effects of racism and develops a positive and secure Black identity. And then stage 5 is where you integrate your racial identity, and some models suggest that there is a movement toward being accepting and aware of other cultures, groups, and organizations in terms as it relates to identity. And so if you look at the way that his story was portrayed in the film, written about in the book, you see how he kind of represents all the different racial identity stages, or most of the racial identity stages for Malcolm X.
Thank you very much. I think that is a very, very, very good introduction. I'm going to invite you. You still have about 3 minutes here. I'm going to invite you to do another piece here, just in terms of that. We talked about that encounter stage, okay, and that liberation stage is the word that I'm going to use, because as Africans in America looked at their liberation, okay, and remember we're talking about a culture that was enslaved in part, so all of their cultures were stripped away from them, primarily from West Africa, the kingdoms of West Africa, enslaved and then brought here. And Imam Wardi Muhammad, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he once offered that the process of enslavement was nothing short of attempting to empty the human content out of the enslaved African and to replace it with something of their own creation and making. And I would say, to the surprise of the dominant culture, these enslaved Africans came out even more human, okay, and more developed, even to this present day, to lead this nation, okay, towards expressing a proper humanity. So the last focus here, if you don't mind, in this last minute, for you, what is your message to psychology? The original word for psychology, it's a Greek term. It actually meant the study of the human soul. In more Western terms, it's now become the study of human behavior, and that's up for grab. Each day is a new normal, which behavior? So, one psychologist statement, what is the role of the Black psychologist towards the liberation of disenfranchised people?
Yeah, well, whoa, I only have 3 minutes. So
No, now you got one.
yeah, no. You know, I think for me, as a young Black psychologist early in my career, it's to do good work, to help to do the liberation work and all the things that you're describing. And so I think a lot of that work is, you know, of course, with the youth. I'm working in colleges, and so really giving people a space to think, to expose them to new thinking systems. And I think that even shows up in Malcolm's life, right? Like when he is early in his youth, he's wanting to assume leadership, right? Like those themes are already present in his story, right? But then you're in this system, you're a person in a particular environment, and that environment is not designed for you to succeed. So he has to figure it out, and he's in the streets. And so he's trying to survive and make money and feed himself and do all that. So he's doing some things, right? Is Detroit Red. And then, you know, he ends up where he ends up. He meets the Nation of Islam. And so he's exposed to thinking systems. And so I think what it is whether it's mentors, whether it's new knowledge, what I really appreciate about his life, his story, is the possibility of reinventing yourself across time. As you're a lifelong learner, you're continuously coming into knowledge. And so I think those themes are so vitally important, and try to spread those with the youth and with the community. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very, very much. That's a good platform introduction to our next presenter, Imam Muhammad Touré. He is currently with the community of El Hajj Malik El Sabah's Islamic Center in South Los Angeles. He has been celebrated in part as a chaplain for talking with disenfranchised men in incarceration, prison institutions. He has a very unique and a very strong voice, welcomed even internationally, as he is part of a national and an international community. And we would like him to spend this time really inviting us to understand El Hajj Malik El Sabah's the Muslim, the liberated Muslim. A great deal of the people that were enslaved and brought here to the Americas actually were Muslim and West African. And so in the diaspora here, they are relooking at their original identity, and brothers like Imam Touré are offering insights on how to do that. So please inform us, brother. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Greetings of peace. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sallallahu ala nabi al-Karim wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I first want to thank you, Sheikh Ajin and Sidi Abdurrahman Ali and the chamber as a whole for inviting me to this blessed and important forum. You know, as the Sheikh Ajin was saying, I am a part of the community of Sheikh Uthman ibn Fourier in America. I'm one of the imams, and we are a community, you know, that considers ourselves to be carrying on the legacy of Al Hajj Malik El Sabah, Malcolm X, may Allah Ta'ala be merciful to him. So we consider him to be one of us. We consider him to be our leader, you know. So for me today, you know, and just speaking in the time that's been allotted, it's really about honoring one we consider to be our leader. You know, the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah bless him, grant him peace, was reported to have said, forgive me for the background there, that whoever is not grateful to people is not grateful to Allah. So this is a part of our tradition, you know, to that showing gratitude and honor to people is a way of showing gratitude to God, you know, and so that's really the context of this for me, you know, with Al Hajj Malik El Sabah. And so I do want to speak about him from the Islamic perspective, because him being a Muslim, Islam cannot be separated from who he was, you know? And so while at the same time we identify with him, you know, as part of our identity or ethnic group, African Americans, people of African origin, all less valid. But the reality is that he was a Muslim, you know, and we believe that Islam helped mold him to who he was. And so in saying that, Malcolm is important for many reasons. And so I will make reference to a verse of the Quran where Allah Ta'ala says that for every people, we sent a guide, right? This is Quran. And so this, of course, this verse is referring to the prophets, peace be upon them all, because Muslims, we believe that there were 124,000 prophets that God sent to this world for the guidance of mankind, with the seal of them being Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon them all. And so this verse is referring to prophets, but it's all in a specific sense. But it also refers to righteous men who would come after the seal of the prophets, who would inherit attributes of these prophets. And for me, Malcolm X, Al Hajj Malik El Sabah is one, this is what he represents for us. Someone whom God raised up for us to show us the way, you know, and so me, I always, you know, when I'm speaking, because I've, you know, been working with youth for a number of years, and just in general, and in particular, Black and brown youth, you know, males in particular, you know, I always tell them, and just trying to reach them and things like that, you got to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, because I say that's mandatory reading for the Black men in America. And one of the reasons I say that is that you know, we're all looking for, we all need someone to show us the way. That's life. That's what a father does, what a teacher does. We need someone to show us the way. So for us as a people, I would say that's Malcolm, okay? You know, that's what he did for me. You know, I've always, you know, although my father, Imam Muhammad Abdullah, may Allah preserve him, you know, I was born into Islam. So I always had that kind of, you know, person in my life to show me an alternative to what else was going on in the neighborhood. But I've always identified with Malcolm. That's my point. You know, I read the autobiography when I was about 15, and I just always had a love for Malcolm because I think Ossie Davis said it best. You know, for us, he represents the best of us. He represents our manhood. And, you know, because he, that's what he represents for us. And so anyway, it's important, you know, taking it back to that verse, you know, when God chooses a person or a people, he prepares them for their mission. So as the doctor was just saying, you know, and talking about the phases of Malcolm's life, really this was God preparing him for his task. All those phases he went through, you know, losing his father as a young man, going through the system, you know, his mother being put in a crazy house. All of these things made him qualified to lead the people. That's my position. And so Malcolm represents for us a continuity of the dynamic leadership that God has always raised up amongst our people. And so I'm of the opinion that his martyrdom, his assassination was among many things, was a key setback in our community. However, we know that it was the decree of God and everything happened for a reason. But I believe that we are really dealing with the consequences of not taking, some of us, or I should say collectively, of not taking heed to Malcolm's message. Because just like the role of the prophets was to give good news for those who follow the path of God and to warn, I believe Malcolm did that. You know, he warned us about certain things that if we didn't take heed to, things would happen. And I think that happened in our community. You know, we've seen the emergence of, you know, the increase of Black on Black crime, just the many things. So Malcolm's important to us, you know, because when we look at today, you know, although we have many others that definitely have that potential, you know, however, you know, there's many things that are suppressing that, you know, when you look at it systematically, you know, because we probably got many people that have the potential to lead like Malcolm, but they might be in a jail cell somewhere. It's just the realities that we're dealing with. So I think that, you know, one of the things that I just wanted to highlight today in honoring Malcolm, you know, it's really about understanding what he means to us, you know, what his message was, and carrying on that legacy and continuing to, you know, to struggle, you know, because, you know, Malcolm, you know, as you was mentioning earlier, Sheikh Ajim, you know, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is the history of our people in this land, you know, and again, you know, because with our unique struggle in being captured and uprooted from our traditions, the legacy of slavery still exists today. And so Malcolm, you know, he, of course, was a part of that, you know what I mean, his struggle and what he was calling us to. right? And so one of the key things is that Malcolm was reconnecting us to our history, to our traditions, you know, and to who we were prior to being enslaved in America. So this is important for us to understand. So I think all of these are lessons that we have to you know, revisit. You know, I think that we have to, our community, the African-American community in general, the African-American Muslim community specifically, we have to revisit and we have to reconcile with Malcolm's message, because I think a lot of people may misunderstand his message, you know, like, people say things like he preached violence or mentioned that stuff like that. You know, and Malcolm clearly stated that, you know, he doesn't, it wasn't about violence. It was about asserting one's human rights. Because if any other group did that, it wouldn't be called violence. But when we do it, when we take a stance that we're going to assert our right, defend ourselves, you know, we call it violent. So all of that in context is what I want to say. So it's really accepting the responsibility of carrying on Malcolm's legacy, you know, and so, you know, that's kind of the gist of what I wanted to say. Malcolm is, you know, he represents leadership for us. And again, I think this is one of the key things that we're missing today as to why we're specifically talking about the African-American community, why we're so fragmented and things like that, because, you know, anytime someone emerges in our community with the capacity to lead, as Malcolm was, they're targeted. You know, so these are realities that we have to, because, and it's important for us to understand it, that this has been systematic. You know, this is one of the lessons from Malcolm's life, is that this is systematic, you know. So I'll kind of cut it there, you know, and so.
And actually, Imam, this is a good time. We gave you an extra 2 minutes, brother, because we just didn't want to stop you. But we're going to bring you back on. Please continue the point when we bring you back on shortly with some questions. Thank you very
Yes,
much,
sir.
brother. I think we have become very, very enlightened. We'd like to bring on now Sister Khalifa Bey. Sister Khalifa Bey is the president of the LA South Bureau of Tourism and Trade. Her family has lived in Los Angeles for over 100 years. She's internationally connected, and she is going to bring the voice of Dr. Betty Shabazz to us, the wife, the helpmeet of Malcolm X, the power couple.
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Ajin, for asking me to be a part of this panel. And I want to say greetings to the family out there in Facebook land. And I also want to greet you and my dear brothers I see. Assalamu alaikum. And as we always speak about Malcolm, and we know Betty is there, but no one ever talks about Betty, Dr. Betty. Let me correct that, Dr. Betty Shabazz. And as I was doing my physical research, because I always knew about her because I was always a follower of Malcolm, the philosophy, by any means necessary. Growing up Los Angeles, I was raised on the East Side. So Malcolm was present. Martin was also present. But as a child growing up, I saw the two philosophies through different lenses. So with Dr. Betty, I termed her quiet power. Quiet power. Because she was the rock for Malcolm. Dexter, next slide. she grew up in Detroit. And her connection to Malcolm is the love relationship that has been lost in our culture. Dexter, can you bring on the next slide, please?
Now, we're gonna get him to do that, and if for some reason this does not work, okay, I think we got it. Dexter, can you hear us?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm changing the slides, but I don't know why y'all not
Okay,
seeing it.
good. Okay, so, go ahead, Khalifa.
Okay.
The love relationship, the love relationship.
It's the love relationships. When I was putting this together and I was seeing her evolution or her rise, how did she become the woman she became? So I looked at pictures from where she started as a young girl. She was born Betty Dean Saunders Sandlin in Detroit, Michigan in 1934. So I collected these pictures so everyone can get a picture of her relationship with Malcolm. When I have the picture here where her and Malcolm were married. I have a picture here of where she was involved in his life, because as a Muslim wife, you support your husband. That's what I like about the culture of Islam, which I believe is more true to nature. You see how they have their children. You see how she would listen to her husband, as I'm sure he's reading the Quran to her. You look at how in the pose with the glasses, how she thinks the women that she, outside of the Islamic world, that she was a part of. Here is Dorothy Height. Here is Bought, Not Boss, and Unbought, Shirley Chisholm. So she had a lot of interactions. You see her with Coretta Scott King, and then you see her as herself in the pictures. Now we see her, because I've always wondered what happened to her mentally after the murder of her husband. She was actually there with her children when this happened. So I've always said, how, as a woman, how do you respond? What is going through your mind? And I can believe for her, it was gathering her children. Her and Malcolm had 6 girls. And then I really love the picture with her and the brothers standing around her and protecting her. That's what I love about the Islamic faith, because, you know, I go to the mosque, and just the way women are respected in the mosque and how Malcolm respected her, and she understood what her position was and how she could conduct herself with what everybody calls the infamous Brother Malcolm, because it takes a certain type of woman and have certain attributes and characteristics to be able to be a wife to one of the most powerful men within our culture. And so it's some of the information that, you know, and pictures and the autobiography, the description of who she is copied. It's just copied. Okay, she did this, she did that. She's the wife of Malcolm X, boom, that's it. But as a woman, to be able to sustain, I always wondered, how does she raise 6 children, 6 girls? She was pregnant with the twin girls at Malcolm's assassination. And I look at these pictures and I see how she came up from that. I've had an instance recently in my life where I lost 3 family members 2 weeks apart. And people ask me, well, how did you do that? How did you go through that? I thought about Sister Betty. I thought about Sister Coretta. How did they manage that as the feminine principle on the planet? Dexter, next slide, please. When it comes to Black women, and in my time of growing up, this is the representation of the essential Black woman to me. Because they always say we have this certain strength, and where do we get it from? It's because she's operating in the feminine principle. That's what I've determined. You have to know your role. Many young women today, they're out of order. Because when in the philosophies, you know, King was more, okay, let's all be friends and we can kind of get it together. Malcolm was saying, look, nah, we're not getting ready to do that because of the past demonstration. So when I remember Black women growing up, I see Betty, I see my grandmother, I see all the characteristics that embody Black women, that how we were made up. Did her upbringing have a part in this? I'm sure it did. But when you become of a different thought, when different thoughts enter, I know for me, or different philosophies that, yeah, you know, let me add to the repertoire in my evolution. So yeah, I admire Sister Betty. Her upbringing was, Dexter, next slide. This is actually her story. I wanted to, because everybody is on a hearsay about her, and certainly I am. But I just want everyone to see, she, you know, as they say today, you know, she brought hers to the table. This question is, well, what are you bringing to the table? Where this is Betty's story, and this is what why she was chosen to be the wife of Malcolm. The Imam spoke about destiny and what situations or circumstances in life prepare you for where you're going to be. And like I said, she was born in Detroit. She graduated high school in 1952. She enrolled in Tuskegee Institute. That I did not know, where she was studying elementary education. She changed her major because she had an opportunity to work in the campus hospital. Can you imagine working in the Tuskegee Institute's campus hospital back in 1953? That's, for me, that's huge. And then she decided to change her profession. She went into nursing as a result of being involved in the Tuskegee Institute Hospital. Like I said, our accomplishments and our institutions, I give a lot of credit to. Soon after that, she earned her undergraduate degree in nursing. She met Malcolm, what they say formerly Malcolm Little, in when the brother talks about the phase Malcolm was in right before he joined the nation. And after conversation, she joined the nation with him. Now, remind you, this is happening back in the 50s when we were not integrated. We were in our own communities. People these days say we never had our own communities. But if you look at Harlem, you look at all these Black Wall Street stories, we had our own towns and communities, and we did well. We thrived. So her and Malcolm got married. They gave birth to 6 daughters. Dexter, next slide, please. So as we all know, Malcolm was ascended from her. And she had to go on and she had to live her life. So she ended doing lectures. She earned her master's degree in public health and administration at Jersey City State College. She worked for different colleges and taught reading and childhood health care, which is what is so desperately needed today. And but when you have 6 girls, you need to know more than just, I got to call the doctor. You're going to have to be able to understand and do some home remedies. By the way, some of those home remedies still work today. We just have to be able to look at the characteristics of Betty Shabazz and find out what she did to get past and keep moving forward as a single Black mother. People think they have brought a negativity to single parenting. And there's nothing wrong with single parenting. Just show the examples of single parenting that work. And for her to raise these 6 daughters, I'm sure she had her help. My understanding is that Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis were the children's grandparents. So there was a structure for her in which to move on and receive her doctorate from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, which is extremely accomplishment is too small a word for what she had come through. And then she went on to teach at Medgar Evers College, and she taught initially in the health science, but she became the college's director of public relations. Next slide, Dexter. Now, what's the legacy? The legacy is the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial and Educational Center. I don't think when I was speaking about institutions, out of all the speeches and things that are going to go on this weekend, is that going to be spoken about? Are we going to talk about the continuing legacy and what the educational center is doing today? So that's where she channeled that energy that's led her up to how she got through. She had a mission to fulfill. She had to keep her husband's legacy alive, because to lose your husband or sacrifice your husband for the sake of your people, that to me is the ultimate. And at this educational center, I just think if we're going to pull information about them, about her, we need to have that source, an authentic source, because Google's only going to give you so much. AI is only going to give you so much. But to be able to go into the libraries of our institution and disseminate the correct information, to disseminate the fact that a woman's role, not only in life, but women You know, where are we going? Where's this new modern woman going? I see him being very, very weak and emotionally inept to handle basic situations. Could you imagine being in Betty's shoes and have to carry this forever? She and Malcolm will be forever tied to one another. And I'm just happy that I can look back at the woman who came before me and exhibited that feminine principle, because we're both male and female, but it's something about the female, the creator of the planet that brings forth life, is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I am glad I was chosen to be able to look at a Betty Shabazz and carry on. So if you guys want a copy of the presentation to get a little bit more in depth about Dr. Shabazz, because she is a doctor. She had all these accomplishments, and what they say, put some respect on her name. Dr. Betty Shabazz. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Khalifa. So that is a grand introduction to looking at the concluding dialogue here. And it is, okay, we said this, we've said that, we've honored, we've recognized, but we purposely chose two individuals who just style themselves as just everyday individuals doing what they do like we all do. But what does the people have to say? So one of the people that we chose was Abdur Rahman Ali, who will now speak. And as I said, he was a great part of the inspiration of this very podcast. And I would like you to share what you said to me to Batir Shema is actually about the baton of Malcolm, and then also the destiny of him moving us from civil rights to human rights. Duran Ali.
Assalamu alaikum. Afternoon, everybody. Alhamdulillah, Sheikh Ajeen invited me to the webinar or to this discussion on Al-Hajj Ali Shabazz. In reference to the baton that Malcolm carried, many before him, many after him, made efforts to hold on to this baton. And simply put, I'd like to try to piggyback off of the Torah, if that makes sense, in reference to Malcolm being raised up the people, and how Allah says in the Quran that He will raise up someone from amongst every people. We know that the prophets were many in succession. So in that light, Malcolm, the baton that he was carrying was the same baton that the prophets and messengers carried. When he was assassinated, when he was martyred, he was on that mission, at least in my perspective. Mention of the Risala, or the messengership, the Prophet Muhammad in the Quran, and Surah Al-Ahzab, I believe it is, Surah Al-Ahzab, beginning in ayat 45. And I'll just quote that real briefly, where Allah says in the Quran, what could be translated to mean, it says, "O Prophet, indeed we have sent you as a witness, a bringer of good tidings and a warner, as one who invites to Allah by His permission, and an illuminating lamp, and give good tidings to the believers that they will have from Allah great." That's just a few ayats in referencing the baton that Malcolm was carrying. He was also what many people will call a revolutionary. You know, he was a great orator, a speaker, someone who fought against the injustices of the time. In Arabic, in the Quran, Allah describes injustice as dhulam. You know, the dhalimun, those people who are unjust, the oppressors. In Arabic grammar, the best of my knowledge, is word dhulam or dhalam have something other than its rightful place. So we know that oppression is something that displaces people. It puts people in a place that's in their rightful place as just human beings. So anyone who speaks out against oppression or who's against oppression, who's a champion for the people, you know, will ultimately be a speaker of putting things in their rightful place, putting people in their rightful place as human beings and to be respected as such. So that baton was many faceted or multifaceted. You know, you have this political, all of this political, you know, has political aspect. It has this historical aspect as we as a people being descendants of Africans. The incident of slavery has linguistics. I mean, it's so multifaceted. And I'm only regurgitating what, you know, our elders have said when speaking about Malcolm and his mission, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. That baton, since then, no one has been able to in its full capacity, because it's not something that just one individual can hold. Malcolm himself doing the work by himself. Many people were his assistants, and many internationally, Muslim and non-Muslims alike, champion the cause that Malcolm was striving to champion. You know, being a champion of truth and outspoken proponent for truth. So that baton is very weighty and is very hot. It's very hot. Who wants to hold it? The plight of an oppressed people. You know, we're on a world stage, world in the time. So as well, Malcolm championed our cause during the time of like the height of civil rights in this movement. But brought our attention beyond civil rights and brought attention to human rights, internationally recognized human rights were being championed all around the world by oppressed people. So it made him accessible to not just Muslims or so-called, you know, African Americans or Black in the diaspora, as well throughout the world. People related to his position of trying to establish human rights. So our attention to that. And I'm not sure how much more I can say that I can offer this panel, but it's time, if we're to be asked who's going to pick up that baton, I think that's a collective effort, a collective responsibility for anyone amongst the people that desires to champion the cause of truth, that desires to champion the cause of the best of humanity, you know, and not having human beings in a downtrodden condition, or a condition where they're not being able to meet the full potential or full dignity as human beings, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you, brother. Your articulation was all that I hoped would come from you. Thurman Ali, again, is a very knowledgeable person in my estimation, and again represents, as he likes to think of himself, the average person. And this is the point. Okay, we're all average people, but by having a Malcolm, by having others before us, a King, all the leaders.
I'm sorry, Gene, but I'm not hearing anything that you're saying.
Let's see. Do we have Jean? Can you hear me now? Khalifa, can you hear me? Okay, I don't know I'm not in control of the pieces here. Let's unmute. Okay, can you hear me now? Imam Toure, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So thank you very much, Abdurrahman Ali. Our last speaker is going to be Ralph Softly. Ralph, are you on?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Ralph Softly is a part of the member of the LA South Chamber of Commerce. He's on our education committee. He's with the travel club. And Ralph, by way of introduction, grew up yet another kind of way. Ralph's father was a professor at Howard University. He had 22 patents for the Nabisco Company. His mother comes from a distinguished education family, teachers at Prairie View University. And Ralph has traveled throughout the country and been amongst many, many communities. And I asked him to give his analysis of Malcolm, and I'll start with his first sentence. He said, Malcolm told the truth, and he said, it's the ballot or the bullet, and it's not swinging versus swinging. Go on, Ralph. What else you have to say, brother?
Well, thank you for that introduction, brother. I appreciate it. And thank you to all the panel members. What you said was so impactful. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you. Oh, well, I'm just going to get right into it. I grew up when I was a kid, and we lived in Missouri, Grandview, Missouri. I went to an elementary school, and there was 600 kids there. And there was 2 Black people, me and my brother. And then the next year, went up 200% to 4 Black people in that school. So I would always come home and tell my mom about Ferdinand Magellan or whoever I was learning about. And she asked me, are you learning about any Black people? And I was like, no. So she took it upon herself to take us she was a librarian. And she would, during the summer months, she would just take us there every day, drop us off, read any book you want to, but just read. So I then knew about Martin Luther King, great person. But then I found out about Malcolm X. And at that point, I began to ask my father about Malcolm X and what he thought. Well, my father was very in tune with it. And he was like, he's like, yes, I agree with Dr. King, but I resonate with Malcolm X, or El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. And I asked him why. And then I began to read upon the man. And then it was just like, like you could co-opt, like I was just telling Najeen, they can co-opt Dr. King, I Have a Dream. You can co-opt this, but you really can't co-opt the ballot or the bullet. You can co-opt a lot of other stuff, but you can't co-opt, if you want to sing, you can't sing on some freedom, you have to swing upon some freedom. Because he told a truth that was so profound. And then we were talking about, Brother Ali was talking about the leadership. And I was also making another point to Ajin about leadership today. At the time, Dr. King killed at 39, Malcolm X killed at 39, Medgar Evers killed at 39, Che Guevara killed at 37. Nothing against anybody today. Jesse Jackson, still alive. Al Sharpton, still alive. So it's sort of like, I've just always had a profound respect for the man, what he stood for, what he lived for, what he died for. I mean, for goodness sakes, he knew that he was going to die. According to the book and according to the movies, he knew he was going to die, but he went out there and stood in the gap anyway. All of them did. They were willing to die for what they believed in. I can't comment on today's leadership. I'm just going to say I know what they stood for because I have their actions and the proof. So that's my 2 cents, folks. Thank you very much.
So there we have it, folks. I believe that we have a nice sample that represents among the thinking of people in today's society in the country that we live in, America. These are voices. Again, our chamber is especially interested in the voices, sometimes mostly unheard, of South Los Angeles. Okay, those voices. And as we did our research, when we have the upcoming games, Super Bowls, and with the upcoming World Cup kinds of things, and the upcoming Olympics, in our surveys, people said things like, and believe it or not, let's pick on the Japanese. The Japanese are going through a whole cultural thing right now. They wearing afros, okay? They're imitating our songs and stuff because they found out that their ancestors were black, okay? And so now they say, whoa, let's find out about us, okay? And so they said when they come for the Olympics, they don't want to go to Disneyland. They don't want to go to Hollywood, none of that. They want to know where Barry White lived. They want to know where the basketball players, they want something real. So now there's a big invitation here now for South Los Angeles for us to get ourselves ready with the right consciousness, strengthen our businesses so they can come to our restaurants, buy our products, these kinds of things. The LA South Chamber is here to help us actualize and strengthen our potential, and to hear the voices like the voices that we've heard today. So in our remaining 15 minutes, and I don't know, I've got a new computer here. Someone can help me. If anybody has any questions, whoever can see who those people are, call on them and let's have some questions. And remember now, there's about 12 participants on this actual practice session here, but there's a large number of Facebook people listening, maybe around the country. Okay, so does anyone have a question?
So nothing's in the chat, Brother Gene, and then I'm checking the Facebook to see if anybody have any comments in the Facebook. And again, if you have a comment in the Facebook, go ahead and put that in there and we can read that off.
And make sure if you have a question for Imam Torre, he has to leave at 12:30, and we are going to end at 12:30, by the way. Okay, so actually everybody's going to leave. But any questions in the chat, Dexter?
No, no questions.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick on somebody. I see Akito Mosley out there. You got a question, Akito? Akito is a brother from the southern part of the country, Mobile, Alabama, not far from New Africa. Okay, and I know some of his personal experiences growing up black. Okay, any questions, Akito?
No question. I just want to say thank y'all. First, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just want to say thank y'all. I mean, this was a marvelous presentation. I learned a lot, as Mr. Softly mentioned, is very impactful. And I do appreciate the sharing of information of Miss Betty Shabazz. Often don't hear much about her life, her legacy. And so much was learned today in terms of her doctoral journey and all of that. And so again, I really appreciate the sharing of I would say Queen Shabazz. And she's definitely a hero who needs to be acknowledged and recognized just as much as Malcolm X as well. So thank y'all.
Phyllis, I see you on Phyllis Chastain. Do you have anything you want to share with us?
She might be working. I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question for.
Hi.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Phyllis.
Thank you for the presentation. It's good to see everyone, including Khalifa and her great testimony. And the Mobile brother, I have family from there. So this is a good way for us to be together, even though we're at a distance. and raise my consciousness and wake me up. So God bless you all. I appreciate it. That's a statement and a question. We need more. When are we going to get more of this? Thank you.
And again, I'm just, because some of y'all know me. If you won't ask questions, I'm gonna call you out. Okay. Anybody else have a statement or a question, or I will call someone else?
Now, I have a question for Ralph.
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
you made it very plain, brother. You made it plain. And in this so-called time of censoring truth,
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm's the example of them trying to cancel truth.
Mm-hmm.
And in his example, how far are we willing to go? Are we willing to die for this?
Mm-hmm.
Making it plain, and it's because people do things with words.
Uh-huh.
You know, in the so-called English language, you know, you may have 3-4 definitions for the same word. So so to become codified and how we move, I think we can learn from Malcolm is to look at some of the things that didn't work well and change those, but he still made it plain with what he knew at the time, especially from a self-protection perspective. So I just want to thank you. It was short, it was sweet, and it is the ballot of the bullet. You know, we keep voting and voting and voting and thinking we're going to vote our way out of this. That's not going to happen. That's not happening. It doesn't work, because everyone else has gotten the benefits that we marched, died, bled, and all that kind of stuff for. So now it's time for us. And I think Malcolm is a great example of one who stood. And I read Revolutionary Suicide.
Huey?
And it just, we just have to take some pointers other than I get our rights, our legacy, and how we survive going forward. So just thank you for making it plain.
You're welcome, and thank you. And hey, one little thing. I've heard a saying, if voting worked, they'd make it illegal.
So Imam Toure, I have a question for you, if you care to share with the audience. I was made to understand from Abdurrahman Ali that community that you are a part of, that's actually international, that the community goes and visits the gravesite of Al-Haj Malik El-Shabazz. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Wow.
I don't even know where his grave is, brother.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's been going on for a number of years now. I think we're members of the Muslim community, not just our community, but Muslims throughout the country and other groups that identify with Malcolm, you know, go to his grave. So there's like an annual, I think they usually do it around on the day that he was assassinated, February 21st. I've actually never been to the on that particular day. I visited his gravesite some years ago. I think I want to say it's in like White Plains, New York, or something like that. And I think Queen Betty, may Allah be merciful to them both, is buried right there by him. You know, and really want to thank the Sister Khalifa Bey for highlighting Queen Betty. You know, but yeah, so that's something that members of our community and other communities have been doing for some years. It's just again, just paying homage, respects, you know, for the sacrifice that Malcolm made, you know. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much, brother, because we're going to invite you to do that honoring. Whenever any one of us are in that vicinity, go talk to Brother Malcolm. And it's our belief that he can hear you. Yeah, go talk to Brother Malcolm. He can't talk back, okay, but he can hear you. I see Stephen Green is on, and Stephen Green is someone special to me. He's actually my brother, okay? And a little interesting story about Stephen is I asked him to just say something. We grew up in Los Angeles, Compton, and Stephen went to Africa pre-med. He's a doctor now, but he lived in Africa for a year, and I think visited almost every country there. But he reports as an inner city young Black man the transition that he had to make when he went to meet our African brothers. Stephen, what was Malcolm in your life?
Hi, everyone. When my brother called me and invited me to listen into the podcast today, I'm seeing patients today and stuff, but I kind of blocked my schedule and so I could be here and listen. And I've been well rewarded. I've learned things I did not realize, and then I was reminded of things that I realized but have not thought as much about as I should. The thing that amazed me about Malcolm X is that I lived through that. I was a young boy when he was assassinated. I lived through that whole experience, as well as Martin Luther King. I also lived through the transition of my brother Hajin from being, what we know him as Billy, to Hajin. And I lived through that, and he has always been an inspiration to me. So what I knew of Malcolm X, I knew through him initially, and what I've come to recognize about Malcolm and the impact he has on me is, as Ralph softly said, is that he put his beliefs in front of him and walked the talk. And so that was the biggest take I got from him, is that he was true to himself and true to what he believed. Same from Martin Luther King. And the irony of all of this, and I wish Dr. Polk was here, I don't see him on the line anymore, but the irony of this is that I was talking to some young white kid out in Lancaster, out in Los Angeles, outside Los Angeles. I asked him, did he know what apartheid was? And he said no. And then I asked him, did he know who Martin Luther King was? And he said no. And did he know Malcolm X? He said no. I said, oh, it's because he's white. So I saw a little 18-year-old kid, Black kid that came in a few days later, asked the same questions. He didn't know either. I said, oh, it's because he wasn't educated. He didn't go to college. I asked a 23-year-old college student, and to my shock, they didn't know either. So somehow in the trends, as we move on and the history of these dynamic people becomes older and older and older, it is getting lost to the future generations. And that is the biggest challenge, I believe. How do we keep Malcolm X's history and Dr. Betty Shabat's history alive? And it's through things like this. And I would love to have been able to ask the professor how he sees this next teaching the next generation. So that's, I'll stop there. And I want to thank you, Ajin, for inviting me. As usual, I have to owe you another one.
So another quick question, Stephen, because I did purposely mention that you lived in Africa there for a year. Just give us a sentence or two. Did you hear African brothers, because you traveled to almost every country in Africa, did they talk about Malcolm?
Not only did they talk about Malcolm, they knew Malcolm better than us, generally speaking. And let me tell you why. Sometimes when you're sitting on top of the mountain and you see out and you don't see anything, you take things for granted. When I went to the University of Nairobi in East Africa in Kenya. And what I found, the university students that I was hanging out with, they were the cream of the crop. This was the Harvard students of their country. And you had to fight really hard to get there. And they were very knowledgeable and well-read. And one of the things they would read about was us, what we were doing here in America, because they had just had their freedom from colonialism for 15 years. Matter of fact, the students who I was going to school with, this was the first college class of a free Kenya. When those kids got liberated, when their country got liberated, they were 5 years old. So these were the first ones to go through the whole educational process in a free Kenya, so to speak. And they knew everything about us. They knew about Malcolm and Martin. They were so well read. And to the point that I was put to shame because I didn't know as much as them. And so to answer your questions, when you're looking up and you're trying to rise up above oppression, many times you have to fight and learn everything you can. When you get to a place like sometimes I believe we are now, where you get comfortable and you think the work is done, even though we stand on the backs of Malcolms and the Martins, then we take it for granted and we lose sight of just how we got here and just how fragile where we stand actually is. So to answer your question, Ajin, they're well read about us and they look at us, what's our next move in many ways.
Well, thank you, brother. Ardina, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, Ardina is one of our chamber members, and she provides a very big service to the community in preserving our legacy through family heritage and pictures. Can you just take a couple of minutes and let the community know what service you offer? Because one of the things that in charge of the Education Committee, I'm the director of the Education Committee. I'm on a quest to go throughout South Los Angeles and interview people and their family legacies. Everybody's not a king. Everybody's not Malcolm. Everybody's not LeBron James, okay? But all of our families helped us get where we are, and their stories deserve to be told too. Imam Torre said he's who he is because of his father. So who was his father? What is his story? Tell us a little bit about how you're helping to preserve that legacy.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you, Ajin. My name is Ardina Brooks, and I am the founder and CEO of Designs by Ardina. And I've been doing this, I guess, for over 16 years now. And what I do is I just help people, families, organizations, businesses to preserve their legacy by bringing life to your photos, which are your stories, so that you can continue telling those stories and pass them on from generation to generation. You know, it's very interesting what Stephen just said about us, our young or future, possibly losing the history, their rich history that really connects them to part of their purpose while they're here and what they are to carry out. And I've been so enlightened today just listening. And I can just share briefly, I'm from Washington, D.C., and I was actually in the Philippines when Malcolm X was assassinated. Still young, can't even think of what grade I was in, but I wasn't as into it. Let me just say it like that. Black history was definitely not a part of our education, but I was definitely a part of when Martin Luther was killed. I was downtown when that happened, and I just remember all the stuff that took place before we could even get home. But I didn't know much about Malcolm. I thought he was just such a radical until I went to college, which was called Federal City College in Washington, D.C. It's now the University of D.C. But that's when I found out his heart, that he wasn't, as you know, the radical person that we had heard about him. But I also just wanted to say the book that I read, it has never left my mind as to how his father was killed.
Right.
And that thing, I mean, it's just like a movie running in my head, you know. But this information that you all have provided has been awesome. And Khalifa, I just wanted to say thank you also for giving that information about his wife, because you didn't hear anything about his wife, you know. And even with the movie with Denzel playing, which he did an excellent job, I still wondered what kind of life did she live, you know, along with Coretta, but there's just been no information about her. So this is so awesome. And I'm glad I was able to take the time to just listen in. But I just want to encourage you, like you said, Ajin, we all have history. You know, we're not Malcolm, we're not those, but then again, who knows? We're still living out our own legacy. So our history is so important so that we can not only live out our history, but that we can pass it on to our families, our younger generation, so that they can continue to pass them on, so that we can connect the dots again, so that we know why we are here and help those that are going to go after us.
So thank you. I think we're at the very end, so I want to extend a personal thanks to Khalifa Bey, Abdurrahman Ali, Dr. Ricky Pope, Imam Muhammad Toure, Ralph Softly, and all of the voices that were heard today. This was on Facebook Live, so you can retrieve it. We will archive it with the chamber. And this is not the last that we're going to hear about Brother Malcolm. This is only a beginning. Thank you very much.